Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the Sussex Police Federation podcast, a new venture for Sussex Police Federation. My name is Royston Martis, and it's great to be here today with Raf Cioffe, the chair of Sussex Police Federation. Good morning, Raf.
Thank you. Morning, Royston.
Raf, we've got lots of things to talk about, so we're going to crack on. Big announcement in the last week or so of the government white paper on policing.
Yeah.
In general, what's your view of the paper?
The paper was very detailed, with a lot of aspirational achievements for this government. The thing that I have an issue with was there wasn't a lot of how they're going to achieve those quite high demand changes that they're looking for police reform. So there's a lot of what they want, but none of the how at the moment.
One of the examples I think that a lot of police officers themselves have been talking about is this licence to practice that has been announced. It's been mooted around in policing for 10, 15 years. But we don't know what that's going to mean. Who will pay for it? How will they get it? What happens if people fail? What happens if people pass? Will it be for every rank? So what's your take on that so far?
There's a lot of concern amongst the membership around the licence to practice. The Home Secretary made comparisons to the Nursing Midwifery Council, the doctors, and also the Solicitors Association in relation to licence to practice. Now all those licences are fee and paying licences. So then it draws to the conclusion around, because of the lack of the lack of detail within the paper, it draws the conclusion on our officers are going to have to start paying simply to hold a warrant card within their pocket.
Because is the warrant card not enough?
I believe the warrant card is enough, because that warrant card illustrates an oath and the office of constable and service to the Crown. So I don't understand the angle. I think if it is down the angle of that they want to professionalise and have an entire professional look in relation to policing and how officers are educated and qualified throughout the country, then that's something that we can get on board with. But if
is it though? Because it's not quite insulting to say that police officers need to be more professional, need to professionalise. Is that not quite insulting to the officers that are already working their backsides off in the job?
There is a sense that they are reinventing the wheel here, because we will have, the majority of force will have professional development records in relation to the officers' qualifications, skills, and what they've been doing over the years in relation to how their performance is. Yeah, there is that. I think from my perspective of what this paper is illustrating around licence to practice is around trying to professionalise those qualifications throughout the country. There is already a mechanism to do that already with the College of Policing, most definitely. But I am trying to draw some positive out of it. But within that area, it's quite limited for me and the membership, because the biggest barrier is the lack of detail within it. What are officers going to have to do to achieve it? What are the consequences if they don't achieve it? You already have the police conduct regulations, and within that you have performance matters that can be addressed within that. Is this another form of disposing of a constable? And that's a concern that I do have, because if you don't meet the criteria that's required within that sphere of the licence to practice, what does that mean for the officer?
What could it mean?
Well,
exit.
Ultimately, my assumptions are falling to the point that officers will be dismissed if they cannot produce a licence or satisfy the requirements for a licence to practice moving forward.
So on top of conduct regs, on top of vetting, on top of now potentially a licence to practice.
On top of UPP, that is already in line with regulations that forces can utilise to make sure that officers are practising in an appropriate way and performing to the required standards.
But you still haven't got any employment rights.
Exactly, and that's the issue. They're starting to introduce things that employees have without looking at the other end of the spectrum around, we are currently not employees, we hold the office of constable. We've got no right to leverage government with industrial rights whatsoever, right to strike, and at the moment that is really important for us, because if they're looking at introducing a licence to practice where you have to, and I'm assuming that you would have to comply and pay for the service to have the licence, then that's going to be something that the Federation will be looking at challenging moving forward.
You mentioned the word assume there, though. There's lots of assumptions
being
made at the moment. There's no detail.
There's 106 pages full of what they want, but nothing in relation to how they want to achieve it. There are loads of things that will require legislation change, which takes some time. It's very aspirational. To achieve that within the term of this government, I think is highly unlikely. Everything in that paper, to achieve everything in that paper within this term of government is highly unlikely. They mention a backstop of 2034. Well, that's quite aspirational because that would mean that this government would have to maintain their current status within government.
Well, let's not talk about politics.
No.
That's not for, and your PCC's all over and very much in the news as well. We won't talk about that either. Hello, Katie.
But it is suggesting that they are looking to remain in government. Of course they are, beyond this term. And the work that they have put in that paper will require them to work beyond this governmental term. So 2034 is the backdrop. If legislation's changed to force the next government to implement the changes, then that would mean another legislation round of
changes. So it's going to take political will, is the point,
will,
from whichever political party is the government or forms the next government.
Of course it will.
Final question from me then on licence to practice. You've got some figures, I believe, of us for other professions and what individuals in those professions have to pay for their licence to practice. And it's quite stark if suddenly 140,000 police officers have to pay those figures.
Yeah, I mean, it would completely undermine the office constable, I think, if a licence to practice was to come in where officers have to pay to receive a licence. At the moment, we have as I've explained, our professional development records in relation to how we're performing. We have, within Sussex, we have our SAP, where it shows the qualifications that we have, how we're keeping up to date with those qualifications, and so
More
forth.
my point, though, Raf, sorry, is that how much that nurses have to pay, how much lawyers have to pay, how much doctors have to pay.
It would be really difficult for officers to swallow paying the best part of 140 quid a year simply to have a licence to practice as a police officer. Us as an organisation, as a federation, wouldn't be able to accept that because the officer constable, if I bring the topic onto pay and working conditions, there are officers out there that are already struggling with their pay, with the current state of the economy, who are attending food banks. To then add and slap another £140 or whatever the figure would
potentially
more, would really undermine the pay mechanism system that we have at the moment. We have limited ability to negotiate with government around it because the PRRB isn't independent, and we haven't got any rights to truly negotiate with them at the moment, which is one of the things our members were polled for us as a federation to start working on industrial rights in the form of, binding arbitration in relation to pay mechanisms.
Well, I think we'll touch more on that in a future podcast, especially with the PRRB gathering evidence. I know the Federation isn't a member of the PRRB at the moment, but you still will have some thoughts, I'm sure, on that as we go. So that we'll address that in a future podcast for our viewers and listeners on that. I thought I'd also ask you, last thing about the white paper would be around mergers. So you're currently the chair of Sussex Police Federation. You're going to go to try and be the chair of Sussex, Kent, Essex, Thames Valley, Hampshire Police Federation, amalgamated. What's the future look like?
I've had this question posed to me by some members already, and the answer is I don't know. Again, the white paper talks about amalgamating forces. It doesn't. In the white paper, doesn't specify the number of forces. The Home Secretary mentioned the number of 12 forces throughout the country. Maybe that was a slip of the tongue because I haven't seen any detail of that whatsoever. Again, we come back to the fact the white paper has lots of aspirations, but no detail as how we get there whatsoever. What does that look like for the Federation? Well, that will require, again, legislation change for Federation, how our makeup is made up.
But more importantly, Sussex police officers like working for Sussex Police. They like the cat badge, do they not? So that's a concern for some officers, isn't it?
It will be a concern. It will be a concern for the public as well, because will that diminish the level of service that they get? I do not know. At the moment, there are pros and cons to everything, Royston, most definitely. Amalgamating, what are the pros that I can think of off the top of my head? Well, there's economies of scales there that can happen in relation to all the services that we use, from the record management systems that we have, to uniform, to vehicles. All of that could be a positive, most definitely. But does that truly require a national merger for a number of constabulary to be able to achieve that? Most probably not. There can be the determination to be able to achieve that at a national level in relation to procurement. what does it look like for officers if we amalgamate in the southeast? I really don't know. It may
I guess
dilute.
well, those officers all be. I mean, we've seen what happened in Scotland in 2013 when they merged their 8 forces into one, and the fear is that in Scotland, Glasgow and Edinburgh get the sort of concentration, but the rural communities don't. So is the worry that, and also in terms of posting where officers could be sent, is the worry that officers who are based and living and currently working in and around, say, Brighton, for instance, might be sent to Milton Keynes or to Chelmsford or to Maidstone. Is that a reality?
Yeah, these are all things that are aspirational, I would say, Royston, at the moment. The devil will definitely be in the detail, because mirroring legislation change, then there would have to be regulation change to also protect officers from things like that, because it would be wholly unreasonable for someone from, let's say, from Sussex having to go and work in Essex for the day. What protective measures are going to be put in place for officers around their essentially employment rights under police regulations? Those haven't been thought out properly in the white paper, and that's why I say it's an aspirational paper. What will it look like for the day-to-day constable? I don't think there's going to be much change at the moment. In relation to the level of response and resourcing that members of the public receive, that's not going to change at the minute. They're looking at, obviously, times for 999 calls, squeezing them down to 15 minutes. We're pretty close to that already. Our 999 response calls are 20 minutes, and I'm sure there's areas for improvement within that, as within everything. But merging everyone into one huge force, well, the Metropolitan Police Service shows what the issues are within that already, or having such a huge amount of a workforce to manage. Sometimes I would suggest it's too big to manage.
So as the changes, potential changes, proposed changes come, you're saying that the Federation will very much be protecting members' terms, conditions, rights, etc.
Yeah. For every section of that white paper, we will be engaging with the membership through a poll to see what the sense of feeling is. We need to be able to engage with members to truly see what the voice of the membership is, and articulate that to government and to the media. At the moment, we're still in really early stages at the minute. There isn't enough detail. We are asking the questions. I've even asked questions to politicians. They don't know the answers at the moment. So this is all aspirational white paper. I haven't seen the detail behind every single subject, from licence to practice, which is a big concern for us as a federation and also to members, and also the amalgamating of forces. We do not know what the detail is. For us at the federation, it's important that we engage with our members to make sure that we get the sense of feeling correctly around what their thoughts are on this paper. Okay,
so the message to officers is look out for future engagement, and also that we'll probably revisit it in a future podcast around when we get some more devil in the detailed devil sort of when we get some more of that, we'll perhaps have another look at what it might mean and what people might react to it.
Yeah, officers will start seeing some engagement from National Federation asking for what their opinion is on certain aspects of the white paper. That's really important, high topic items for us. And then we will assess and analyse that data and articulate that to government. And we will continue representing officers moving forward at that national level.
Okay. We'll conclude today then, Raf, if you may, with a very sad subject, I think it's fair to say, of the number of colleagues who sadly commit suicide in policing and attempt to commit suicide. We have the numbers, 100 over the last 3 years, but we're not sure if these numbers are correct or are under counted because of different forces counting in different ways or not counting. But obviously, we know it's a very personal issue to Sussex,
it really is,
and a very topical issue with Ben Websdale's inquest concluding last week. Why is this such an important issue to you, the caring for colleagues in this way?
Well, within my role I need to take care of the well-being of my members within Sussex, and that transcends throughout the country as well, because this topic isn't just a local thing; it is a national issue. And I'll address a few of the topics that you mentioned around statistical data, because it has a lot of people won't know that there is no requirement to record a suicide or an attempted suicide in relation to a police officer.
No requirement on forces?
No requirement for forces whatsoever. So that's a really important topic for officers to know in their mind moving forward, because the Federation are looking at trying to change legislation, which we we're a few steps ahead already to change legislation to make sure that forces are required to record suicides and attempted suicides, because the data nationally is showing some quite horrific figures. In Sussex, we've had a few suicides, and we know of a few attempted suicides, and it's really important to record that data to actually capture what the scale of the issue is. At the moment, the Federation have been left in a silo to go and capture that data from the information that we have as branches individually and report back to national, so therefore we can have some analytical data to look at what the scale of the issue is. And those figures have been published, and it's quite heartbreaking to see, where because through their course of their duty, officers are suffering trauma, and then usually when they get to a stumbling block within their career or home life, they start considering the options of taking their own life.
That's very sad. And as you say, I guess what get measured gets done, doesn't it? If we see it's a bigger problem than we thought, then maybe we'll get more support for officers, support for colleagues. A lot of chat around police officers who are under investigation are perhaps more likely to go down this road, sadly. That's Federation are calling for 12-month time limits on investigations, but more care and compassion for officers. I think that's a fair request, isn't it?
Yeah, being under investigation is a really difficult thing as a constable to go through. The statistical data that we have shows that there's a large portion of officers that are under investigation that commit suicide or have ideations of suicide going through that experience. It's an incredible difficult place to be, whether you're going through a criminal or a misconduct allegation, to try and manage your emotions, because policing usually is a career for officers. Depending on when you joined, there's a 30 or a 35-year career, and during that time, the longer that you spend, the more institutionalised you become, and you can't see a vision of yourself outside of the organisation. And I think there's a lot of shame that's carried by officers who are under investigation, because your name is published in the media. Your photo is taken by the media and put into a narrative in a really poor, negative way, creating barriers for future employment.
Well, just because you're under investigation also doesn't mean you've done anything wrong, does it?
No, and there's also, there should be an assumption of innocence. I'm afraid a lot of the members that I speak to, they assume their guilt. And also with the legislation change in 2024 around the presumption of dismissal for gross misconduct cases, allowing the chairs really limited scope to look elsewhere but to dismiss an officer, that does sit within officers' mind when they serve those papers.
They fear the worst, don't
they? And they fear the worst straight away. They are catastrophising within their mind, and it's a really difficult place to pull them back out of. We as a federation have a role to support those individuals out of it, and we have got some tools to our disposal.
Such as what?
We have, obviously, when officers get into this position, we have solicitors and barristers that we instruct. We have a Fed rep that's qualified to deal with the actual legal side of things for that member. And also for us, we have access to our health assured through our group insurance to divert people to seek medical assistance in relation to depression, anxiety and stress. Because as soon as we start seeing those indicators, we like to get those referrals in early on.
Of course, yeah.
We also have access to GP24. We're actually, instead of relying on the National Health Service, we will divert a member directly if we have got concerns to GP24, so we can satisfy ourselves that they are engaged with professionals straight away so they can get the help they need, and that referral goes back into the NHS.
So that is a message to colleagues who are watching or listening to this, that there are mechanisms to support them should they need.
There are mechanisms for the Federation, and there are even mechanisms for Sussex Police that can provide additional support. If you go through that process of being under investigation, you will be assigned a welfare officer, you will be signposted to the assistance that you need, and there's a long list of it, and you will have regular contact from the Federation and also your welfare officer. Sussex Police have got a duty of care for officers, and they fill out what's called a duty of care risk assessment, which is also known as a DOCRA, and that is to kind of rate where the risk sits into individuals and what level of support they truly need, and that will signpost those welfare officers to the appropriate place to provide that support for an individual. It is an incredible difficult place to be.
Yeah.
It's an incredible difficult job for the welfare officer, adds additional stress and burden to them because it's an additional responsibility, and usually it's quite personal because they're probably going to know the individual. So it adds that additional layer of emotional stress to that individual. So we recognise that, and if welfare officers are struggling, I urge them to come out and speak to the Fed Rep, speak to the Federation so we can support you as well and direct you to where you need, because all we want is the best care for our members, to get them through this process so that they can see a life beyond policing if required, or how we integrate them back into policing once the matter is over.
Whatever the outcome.
Whatever the outcome is.
We both knew Ben, obviously a great guy. What would be a fitting legacy to Ben, if, in your view, following his inquest last week?
The inquest was a very emotional time for the Federation, myself, and the family that were there, and also the officers within Sussex Police that were there representing Sussex Police. I'll have to recognise that. It's a very difficult position to be in. The legacy that I'd like to leave for Ben is hopefully some meaningful change that can truly prevent officers from being in the position that he found himself in, which is an incredible, difficult position. I won't go into the complexities of his case because, I'd like to leave him some sensitivity there around that aspect of things. But it's an incredible, difficult place to be when you're under investigation and you're a police officer, and that stress needs to be recognised by the organisation. At the end of the inquest, I gave evidence around the national picture on suicides within the policing profession, and mainly around what the impact is in relation to officers who are under investigation. The data that we captured illustrates some quite high statistics in relation to how many officers are under investigation from 2022 to 2025, and not all forces have come back, not all branches across the country have come back with that data, so there's still a data gap for this year around how many officers have taken their own life whilst they're under investigation. And it's quite shocking, Royston, to be fair. From the inquest, what we achieved, the coroner was in agreement with us that Sussex Police should be recording suicides and attempted suicides so we can see the scale of the problem. And I'm really pleased that the coroner said that in her narrative at the end and her conclusion. And also that on the balance of probability that Ben's death, the investigation had a significant contribution to Ben's death. And from knowing Ben, I could see the shame that he carried around the aspect of being under investigation. And I implore those that are listening, if you see shame within one of your colleagues, that is a high risk factor, in my opinion. And that's something that we need to mitigate somehow. And we're always there to support if that risk is shown to us moving forward. And I illustrated that to the coroner when I gave evidence in coroner's court.
So a fitting legacy for Ben, some meaningful change to help as many colleagues, not just in Sussex but around the country, as possible when they're in their darkest
And I really
hour.
would like Sussex to lead the way in relation to recording data. And it may sound to officers, well, how's that going to help? Well, it will help in seeing what the true scale of the problem is. At the moment, there is no mechanism apart from the Federation recording the data, none whatsoever. We want the organisation who has a better infrastructure to record accurately what's going on with our colleagues throughout the country.
Because it can be dismissed, can't it, by governments, by forces? Oh,
it can.
It's just the same as every other.
If there's no requirement, why would you record
every other
it?
profession, etc. Yeah.
It's additional work. Well, what I say is, morally, we do need to start recording it. How can we record it locally? I think we've got a really good system. We've got our FIAM system, which is essentially our accident reporting system, where we can record this data. It sits under the health and safety banner, and we can start recording it. So therefore, us as a Federation and Sussex Police can see what we can do to assist our colleagues moving forward.
Okay.
And that's what I would like. And that is a fitting legacy for Ben moving forward, that actually we are starting to divert people away from that position that he found himself in, and hopefully provide that well-needed support and care that individuals need moving forward.
Raf, anything else you'd like to add today?
Not at the moment, Royston. No.
Lovely. Well, we'll come back soon with another Sussex Police Federation podcast. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And we'll see you all very soon.
Thank you.